Hello and welcome back to Astrology in the Wild. My name is Key Tyler, and it's been a while since I've been on here. I think mainly because there's been so many different transitions lately. Astrologically, I know so many people who have gone through different changes in their lives, and I'm experiencing those changes too. I'm experiencing where to put my time, what's important to me. And after having a meeting with my teacher and mentor to remind me that these things are important for the overall general public to feel good about what's happening in the world, I'm back. So, how you feeling? Today we're going to talk about Uranus and Gemini's transition. So right now, currently, Uranus is in the sign of Taurus, and Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So let's think about what Taurus means. Currently, as I'm recording, today's the first day of Taurus, 0 degrees. And Taurus always represents this personified beauty, the accentuation of all of our pleasures centers, like all of the five senses, and the senses bring us pleasure, right? Money can bring us pleasure. Taurus represents finances, the money, the economy. It also represents what we have physically. So our resources, our access to those resources, the ease of which we get those resources. And so if we think about Uranus in Taurus, it's been this way since, let me look. Since 2019. Uranus went into Taurus from 2019 and it's ending in 5 days. And so, what have you been doing since 2019? What has changed in your life? Because even though Taurus, people say it's like the stubborn sign, the sign that doesn't move, the sign that, takes long to do a thing. All of that can be true, but as a person who has a lot of Taurian placements, I tend to think of this sign as change. As with all of the fixed signs, I see it as an opportunity to make change once we have decided. And, I've always been taught that with Taurus, it means when we have, even though we might take a long time to get there, once we've decided, it happens. So I just wonder, in this past 6, 7 years, what have you decided for yourself that you are going to change that is completely different, right? So for myself, let me turn off my phone here because we got all kinds of disturbances. When 2019 came, I think just recently quit my job. And I remember listening to someone talk about what Uranus and Taurus would bring. And it's so interesting because life has changed so much since then. I used to be an engineer. I used to work in plumbing. So I would create all of these designs for newly custom built homes in Las Vegas. And when it comes to custom homes, they are homes that have a lot of things in there. These are people who generally have a lot of resource, so they're able to pick and choose what they want. Sometimes they'll have celebrity, sometimes not. Maybe they'll just have celebrity where they live. And so my job was to make sure that all of these things were in their homes. And what rubbed me the wrong way is the use of resource and how it was used. It was just a lot of wasting of water, a lot of wasting of water. That was a big deal to me at the time. And not to mention, there was a lot of other things going on in my body. Taurus also represents the body, the realization that we're in a body. It's a pleasurable body. It's a body we can take care of. And so, Uranus and Taurus was knocking on my door long before I had even transitioned about, hey, How do you feel about the use of resources? How do you feel about your body? How do you feel about the way you work? You work too much. You work too much for your bodily system. How are you going to reduce that? And I was working for a great company, but they were not taking me pulling back um, in any kind of light. They were not listening to that because I was voicing that I needed more time to myself. I needed more time to recuperate. I wasn't able to move my fingers very well anymore because I was just in this like very Capricornian, like very still, very non-moving kind of industry where you just sit in a chair and you're on a computer and you're doing your thing. And so I let it go. And I had a partner that helped me, pay the bills and to keep the lights on. And so my resources, while they were dwindling in terms of, my financial resource, it changed drastically, but we were still able to take care of ourselves. And we continued to whittle things down. I really got the opportunity with Uranus and Taurus to see how little I could live with because I had been in a space where I had a lot and I spent a lot and I did a lot and I was able to provide a lot for me and my daughter. And after meeting my partner and kind of joining forces, I realized that, together we could do a lot more. So I was able to really change things. Now, fast forward a couple years, and my partner and I decided to live off grid. And so Taurus represents land. It represents the property that we own. It represents the parts of our lives in which we have a restful, beautiful, um, provided for space. And living off grid, it is desirable for most until you really get into it and you realize how taxing it is, how much it takes from you, how much you need to put into something in order to get something back. And so that was a very valuable Venusian lesson. I mentioned Venus because Taurus is the ruler of Venus. And so there has been this Venus quality to a lot of the past couple years, right? When we think of Uranus, so Uranus generally will represent the elevation of our lives. When we will try to exceed our own expectations by making things better, by realizing that, we need to have a higher standard for ourselves and where we want to be. So for me, the higher standard was reducing everything down and seeing, what I could do with what I had and what I actually needed. And that's really important lesson. And so with Uranus, we're thinking about the internet, we're thinking about networks, amongst all the other things of elevating our lives and looking at how do we civilize ourselves in a particular way. What are we seeing as the pie in the sky, the thing that we're really reaching for, the thing that we really want for ourselves? And so with Uranus and Taurus, collectively we had gone through this thing of the pandemic, right? And overnight, commerce changed. The access to which we could get resourceful things, from new patio sets to, beauty products, drastically changed in terms of how quickly we were able to get them. I mean, it really sped up the process of our consumerism as a whole. And I think what we're realizing now as Uranus and Taurus is about to change is that there's been a lot of consumerism. There's been a lot of money we've spent. There's been a lot that we've been overdoing. It can kind of represent like overdoing things. And, going to the extreme to some point. But for the most part, I really see that there is this drastic change. Amazon is now the number one in terms of where we go to get our things. Whether you're conscious or not, whether you go and get, products and um, and the things that you need in person, there is usually, the locality of where you get those things, with Uranus and the advent of being able to get things through the internet. I mean, locale has really changed. A lot of the businesses that we were used to visiting have changed. A lot of the places that we eat no longer exist. And so there's this tempo of like, wow, things have really changed, even though it's been this kind of slow progression, and we've been watching it for years. When we step back and we look at who we were at 2019 and what we were doing with our lives and how we were getting things and how we were communicating with one another, how often we were on the internet. I mean, whoa, right? Like, how long do you spend on the internet per day? Um, I know my time has gone up since 2019, that's for sure. And so what I wanted to talk about was the importance of Uranus moving into the sign of Gemini. And it is, something wholeheartedly different because the sign of Gemini is the sign of the twins, right? It's moving from the sign of an animal per se, with the cow, the bull, to a human force. We're talking about the duality because the twins, because Gemini represents two. We can likely think of this energy as two things existing at the same time and both being true. And there's a level of language. There's a level of movement with this transition. There's going to be a lot happening. I'm not going to lie to you. I think it's going to be a lot faster than what we've experienced, especially when it comes to the advancement of things, the way that things are currently. We're not really continuously focused on the resources. Right now we'll be consumed with our money. So Gemini represents money, because it rules Mercury. It's the commerce as well. It's how fast or slow the money is moving through our hands. It also represents, the sign of Gemini represents our siblings. It represents, the third house can represent, and Gemini rules the third house. So generally these themes with the house, the sign, the planet, we will feel all of these energies, whether they belong all together or not, because they don't, of course. But when we take them apart, we're going to be realizing, who are our neighbors in the third house, right? What are we going to school for? What are our banks like, right? With Mercury, we're going to be wondering, like, do we have access to food? What is the food situation looking like? What is the monetary system actually doing? As opposed to when we think of finances with Taurus, we're kind of really seeing this slow and steady progression of more, paying more, having to do more, or maybe doing less. When we were getting those resources, we were doing a little less. But I wanted to think about Mercury and Gemini moves quickly. Usually this is the sign that rules the hands, and also rules kind of like the movement of legs, being on a bicycle, taking a good walk. These are Gemini functions, moving around in your neighborhood, saying hi to your neighbors, right? Knowing what other people are doing with themselves. It is the sign of knowing. And so with Uranus and Gemini, there is this big idea about how much do we know? And will the level of knowing help us elevate our lives? Will it help us get to better places if we are more informed about what's happening? And so Gemini also rules the social media aspect. So with Uranus and the internet and Gemini and the social media, we will see things kind of uptick, and then these unexpected things will happen where they will spiral out of control, like we have witnessed with Uranus and Taurus, and the resources and the spending and the just too much of things, right? Oh, and like what's also interesting too is Uranus and Taurus, kind of moved its way up and moving its way out. Like, you know, some of us reached better status in our lives. We got, the house, the car. We actually had money in our pockets. And maybe we were able to afford all the foods and all the sweets and all the loves in our lives. And so, what can look like, elevation could also be just kind of excess. And so I just, I want to ask you, have you spun out with some of the excesses? Um, and, with Uranus moving into Gemini, I think it's going to be less to do with excess and more to do with the level of mental space that's going to be taken up. So it's going to be less of physical things, tangible things, things that we're touching, seeing, tasting, and smelling, and more of what's going on up here. So we're going to have to be very, very mindful of our nervous systems and kind of how we're moving with that. So let's get into the technicalities of this Uranus and Gemini, because it didn't happen it hasn't happened, sorry, since 1942. 1942, oh shiz, what was happening in 1942? Well, it was a time marked by World War II. We were in a world war. Um, and it's also a time signified by the Holocaust. And there were severe goods rationings happening at that time. So we go from a time of being able to get whatever we want at any point in time, food delivered to our house. We can buy the clothes and the shoes and the things on the internet, to potentially realizing that, okay, history can and will repeat itself in different aspects and may contain some of the same energies, the same people, the same ideas as the last time, but will have a little bit of a different flavor. And so we're currently seeing this world war happening between Iran, between Israel, between the United States, and we're all wondering, okay, how far is this going to go? How will we get our resources if the ships can't get through Hormuz? What are we going to do? We just keep watching social media, we keep watching the news and seeing what's going to happen. So Uranus and Gemini has already begun. We have already started to see the changes happening. And as it happened in 1942, it's surrounding similar energies, similar people. We're still, have a race of people who are being affected by this. And so it's a really interesting time to usher in this Uranus and Gemini and wonder, okay, how are we going to elevate our lives? How are we going to have a new mentality about what we're moving into? And how do we see life from a higher vantage point? How do we be more positive and less bleak about the things? And this is what I want to impart when I talked about two things can be true at one time, meaning we can be positive and want positive things to happen and want the best for our situation, and realize that that's not actually happening. And realize that this is a hard chip to chew. It's very stale chips, where we can see what's happening, but we still want something different, and we're still reaching for that, and we're not being brought down, and we're not being smashed down by it. We are um, trying to elevate one another, trying to pull one up from the wrong. So if I help you down there and then I help you up there, will you help me up there? And Uranus is what planet brings that to light when we focus on community, when we focus on one another, and elevating the human condition. And so, you know, my view is an evolutionary standpoint. So what that really means is like, how do we move into higher forms of living? How do we take these really hard truths and make them worth something, right? How do we go through something so tragic? Like, think about some of the most tragic things that have happened in your life, some of the really crappy things that have happened. At the same time, we can think about things that have come out of those terrible situations that actually have elevated our lives, have actually made us realize some really profound things. And we wouldn't have had the opportunity to look at it that way if we didn't have these unexpected situations. So Uranus also represents unexpected situations. It represents being surprised. Like, the wool got pulled over my eyes for a moment, or just realizing that you thought that things couldn't get any worse, and they did. And it's really not until after something happens that we realize that well, that kind of happened for this reason and this reason, and some of those reasons could be bad and some of them are still terrible. Both can be true. So that's what Uranus and Gemini is bringing. Things will happen out of nowhere. We will be surprised. We will be in disbelief about a lot of the things that we're hearing and seeing in the sign of Gemini. But really, if we sit down to think about it, I am most positive that a lot of us have picked up on and know the end product before it actually happens. So there's this elevated level of awareness that we have to have, especially around the information that we're being given. In the sign of Gemini, it does represent, like I said, social media, but it represents the news outlets. It represents the radio. It represents the people that we're listening to, that we're trying to get information from. We have to definitely take into account that not everybody has our best interests at heart. And if you can think about like the worst situation when it comes to that, you are in the know internally, because Uranus says, what could be the worst? What's the worst that could happen? Be aware of what the worst can be and still live in your dignity, still live with the bright spot in your life, still center other human connections as the way. So you and I, as people, become a better source of information for one another on a personal level. So we might have to like actually move away from some of the ways that we've been interacting, because for a while we were thinking the internet is the best thing ever. We're getting the chance to network. We're getting the opportunity to talk to people that don't live in our current demographic. We're talking to people that are not the same race, that are not the same belief system as us, and it's been a really beautiful ride. But we're also witnessing, the unpleasant parts of that. And I think what Uranus and Gemini is really trying to do is to bring us back to one another, to help us learn that we've got to rely on each other. We've got to pass this information in a way that is not like telephone, where things get lost in the shuffle as people start, re-saying things and redoing things, because that's what's going to happen as well. But you know, I don't know. Put down in the comments if you can think about another way that this could happen, in which, human connection being centered in a more personal way, like what that could actually look like, and how it could not represent the game of telephone where things get lost in the shuffle. I really believe that Uranus gives us the ability to see beyond the veil. I also believe that, and this is how I was taught, was that Uranus, the sign of Aquarius, this um, 11th sign, 11th planet. There's not 11 planets, but you get what I mean. Um, we're at this point where, um, how do we evolve? And what are we evolving? And in my lineage, evolutionary astrology, we are always looking to evolve our consciousness. What is consciousness? It's what we believe to be true, what we experience in our lives, how we react to that. What level of spiritual understanding do we have? What level of thought, action, amount of love can we put towards a human experience? How do we really see things, look at things, believe things? I think all of this will be questioned as Uranus moves into Gemini, because it's accentuating a part of our lives where we're now seeing a dip in the quality of information. We're seeing a dip in the quality or the access to the resources we need. We're finding ourselves in moving into a valley, and eventually we will come out of that valley and move over the mountains, and we'll be high up in the air again. But sometimes we have to be in this valley so that we can be closer to the ground, and maybe put our ears to the ground and really listen, and really pay attention to all the dichotomies in the world. When people are talking out of the side of their mouth, they're telling you something, but there's also something else that they're saying and doing that negates everything that's coming out of their mouth. And so I believe we're seeing that now too, right? It's going to be a very interesting time because, for roughly the next 6 years, this will be our experience. We'll be experiencing the ups and downs of our money situation, of what our banks are doing, of the information that we're being fed, the quality of that information, and transportation. Gemini also rules, Gemini, the third house, Mercury also rules the way we get around. Currently, I live in Northern California, and we have a subway system called the BART. And the BART is experiencing where the Uranus and Taurus, everybody started working from home, and the movement slowed down big time. So people stopped getting on the BART, stopped getting on the train. It's not a subway, it's a train, sorry. They stopped getting on the train to go to work. And this was a big way of people moving around. This transit system was heavily relied upon because, people who live in Oakland or, on the other side of the body of water to get over to San Francisco to work in their tech jobs or whatever's happening in the city, that has reduced greatly. It really has not changed since we've all stopped being in the COVID mindset. There's still a lot of people who are no longer taking this transit. And in so doing, the city has determined that they're going to have to reduce the amount of rails that they make available. They're going to have to stop it so that it's not running over the weekend. And they're going to stop it at like 9 p.m. And this greatly changes the way regular people are going to get the opportunity to get home. We've got mothers with children, we've got elderly that are going to have to walk longer, that are going to have to pay more, that are going to have to get on different buses. And so it's really going to change the situation. So currently, right now, we are signing petitions to have a vote on it. They're going to be voting on it very shortly. And my hopes is that they'll be able to continue to fund the BART system so that people still have access to move around. And even though it's not the amount of people that they're hoping, um, you know, it's a very interesting change. And I think a lot of us were not expecting for this to happen, for it to happen like this. So Uranus, let's bring it back to a mythological point of view for Uranus. Because in Greek mythology, Uranus is the first god of the cosmos. And usually when you see him, he's represented as a man. He's holding the wheel of the zodiac. And he is physically representing bringing the heavens down to earth. And that's what it means in a nutshell. I think a lot of people will look to astrology for information, for ways of feeling informed, so that they feel like they have information in their hands. And I feel like I've already seen that happen. I feel like that has really started to elevate since Pluto has moved into the sign of Aquarius. Because Aquarius, Uranus, 11th house does represent like astrological, looking up at the stars, seeing the sky as a level of information. So I really think that'll be a big change for us. Like, how do we look above the clouds to make sense of what's happening to us? How did the ancients do it? How can we have a higher view, a more educated process about things? How are we going to think about life? I think a lot of us are going to have these dual ideas about that, but this change is very important. I wanted to say that it's interesting, if you're born after 1949, if you look at your birth chart, you'll realize that Uranus is opposite Chiron. So Uranus will be here and Chiron will be almost exactly opposite. And before 1949, it was not that way. It was kind of all over the place. You could have them closer together. You could have them in a square, sextile, or trine. But us born after 1949. So Chiron is the asteroid of the wounded healer, the maverick, this extremely smart being that spreads knowledge, that teaches people, that helps people, but is severely wounded in their own particular way. And so when we think about Uranus and this change, we will have to assume that there are going to be some woundings. There are going to be some things that happen that, we can't come back from in a light sense of the way. But it's going to be a teacher. It's going to be a lesson. We are going to rise above the occasion in some kind of way. And depending on where Uranus is in your chart and how it's interfacing with Uranus and Gemini is what ways we might see that. So I give readings. Please visit my website, astrologyinthewild.com. I do them in person if you're here in the East Bay. If not, we can do it through Zoom. But I just wanted to offer that to you in case you're like, how's this Uranus going to affect me? Don't go to ChatGPT. They're stealing your information. Please do not use that AI tool. If you have to use AI, I think it was recommended that you use Claude. In any case, AI is not the proper place to get your astrological information. So counsel, look to the brilliant minds that are in this lineage, and find out what you should do with Uranus and Gemini. Now, I don't want to put a lot of fear into the thing, but I guess I just want you all to be aware that this is kind of a large thing. And while I do believe that we're going to experience this turbulence, I also feel like we're going to have these really bright moments and really exciting moments, where a lot of our dreams are going to come true in different ways. Because the 11th house is known as the house of our dreams. And the 11th house is linked to Aquarius. It's linked to Uranus. So all of these energies were just like, okay, if Uranus is in the sign of Gemini, what are we wishing to happen? What do we want to happen with this? What are our dreams and hopes and wishes when it comes to our money, when it comes to how we're moving around in the world, when it comes to how we address and are in contact with our siblings? How are we treating our neighbors? How are we wanting to move with this energy? And I just want to put that out there, that we are allowed to dream. We are allowed to have very lofty ideas about how we want our lives to look better. And I do believe that Uranus has this great ability to bring better into our lives. So no scare tactics, just reminding you that things do get turbulent, that things do go awry. And also, things do get better in certain avenues. And we will intrinsically feel happy about a lot of different things. Will we feel happy about everything that we see, everything that we're notified of? No. But what we're able to control is what's in our immediate environment, Gemini. And so, how are we cultivating that for ourselves? You know, how are we improving our life in this small little piece of the puzzle, you know, in this area that we are inhabiting? How do we make that better? Just some food for thought. You know, you might want to drop down in the comments and just throw in an affirmation. What are you looking for? What are you wanting to do with this energy? How are you going to improve your little space? You know, how are you going to move your little legs? How are you going to move your hands? You know, how are you going to use these tools that you've been given to do good in the world? So Uranus is a generational planet. And we say that because it is an outer planet that incorporates a longer view of time than the personal planets. So the personal planets, they move pretty quick around the zodiac. They change signs quite often. But with these outer planets, they take longer to transition. And they're actually really great because we can start to pinpoint areas of our lives that have shifted, right? And so, you know, with Uranus, it moves signs every 6 to 8 years. So if we were talking just about 2019 until now, and you're just thinking about all these things, you can imagine, like, we're going to have to take stock of what's going to happen over the next 6 years. And it's going to be interesting, to say the least. I think 2032, sorry. 2032 is when it will transition into Cancer, and we'll be having a much different experience then as well. So I think the one thing that I really love about the outer planet transits is this reminder that life never really stays the same, that we have this really grand opportunity to change things for ourselves because the outer world never remains in the same way. And we have this opportunity to rise to the occasion, to be different people, to reinvent ourselves, to reinvent the wheel. that we're not stuck, that we're not beholden to a particular experience. So that's another positive note for that, and something to remember. So, like we said, it's a generational planet, and the people that will be mostly affected, well, I won't say mostly affected. Let's just say people who are having a direct link with Uranus in the sign of Gemini, whether it's making a trine, a square, an opposition, or a conjunction, you are going to be experiencing its effects in a very deep way. So if you have Uranus in Sagittarius, which a lot of the Gen X, like kind of Gen X or millennials, that swing of people will be having this Uranus opposition. And so there's opposing viewpoints. There is, things that are going to be directly linked to our own elevation, whether we see that, whether we experience that or not. And the baby boomers are going to be having a conjunction. They're going to be having a return, a Uranus return. And when Uranus returns at roughly age 83 to 84, it'll be at the same position the day that they were born. And I've most recently seen some scientific research showing that this is kind of the last developmental change of the brain. So Uranus, Aquarius also represents the brain. And so the baby boomers are going to be experiencing some different changes when it comes to their mental acuity, when it comes to their ability to stay up with the times. You know what I mean? Using the latest technology might start to actually become more difficult than it felt. They might be just slowing down a tad. Nothing scary, just what happens to us human beings, and it's to be expected for all of us. And so, last developmental changes to the brain, what does that actually mean? So, I was doing some research a while back to find what the main affliction is for each generation. Because what I've noticed in my own personal life is that baby boomers have particular afflictions that are really common amongst each other. And it just keeps repeating. I keep meeting the same people who are having these similar issues. And I'll list some of those issues, but I really want us to be mindful of these people who are experiencing these changes. I've seen a lot of negative connotation as a millennial towards the boomers, and it's not been very kind, and for reasons that I won't state. I won't say it's for good reason, but for some it is. There's been a lot of negative connotation on each side. But to bring this to a more human, more loving, more kind thought process, let's look at this as this is our aging population. And what do we do when people are moving into a next stage of life? We help them, just like babies, right? So baby boomers are the longest living people in our lifetime. We'll probably won't see another generation live as long as they will, and as many as they will. So this is a very important time to take stock in what happens to people when they live a long time. Things start to slow down. Things stop working. And so what have you seen in the boomer generation? I've seen a lot of brain related issues with the generation, a lot of dementia and Alzheimer's. That is one of the main afflictions for their generation. Another is heart related issues when it comes to circulation. So I've noticed that people who have this Uranus return, and Uranus in Gemini in particular, the movement of the legs are the sign of how quickly the mind is going to move, how quickly the brain is going to move. So if you're able to keep those legs moving, the brain is moving too. It's also like, if you ever thought, when you personally, not Uranus in a Gemini, but whatever generation you're in, do you notice that when you go for a walk, your mind just wanders and you come up with all of these really brilliant ideas and ways of solving problems and ways of elevating your life? Well, this is kind of the general idea. And so as mobility is lessened, in your 80s, 90s, the brain starts to have this change. And it's mainly because it's very, systematic in the body that, when circulation is reduced, the brain gets less blood, less oxygen. And so cells die, like this is a natural part of life. This is the way that the body works. So this isn't a scare tactic of all of Uranus and Gemini people are going to have dementia. That's not true. But what I will say is that because of all of the things I mentioned before, we're going to probably see it a lot more than we've noticed with other generations, right? And so I've been trying to help the baby boomer generation, because I have a lot of them in my life, to just egg them on to continue to move those legs. If the body feels heavy and mobility feels difficult, get them in the water. Get them to a place where they can feel light again and they can get that circulation moving and get those lungs pumping, get those arms moving. We want the lower extremities to talk to the upper extremities and to feed the brain with food in the form of blood and oxygen. So I just want to say that, this is going to be a prime time. If you're like, I don't know what to do with my life, but I want to help people, help the boomer generation. There's going to be a lot of openings for opportunity when it comes to helping these people and being there for them, and helping them with their heart health, and getting them to see that they're still important in our lives, whether you are connected with your parents or not. Maybe there's neighbors, maybe there's really lovely people that you enjoy seeing and you want them to do well. Help them in some kind of way, be there for them. So, we've had a brief introduction of Uranus and Gemini, July of 2025, and again in November, before transitioning back into Taurus because Uranus was retrograde. And so, I don't know, did you get any news at that time? What was happening with your life? For myself, I feel like I was thinking about school. I was still in astrology school with Maurice Fernandez, and I was really wanting to finish, but then I was also thinking of other school because I'm a serial schooler, okay? Don't judge me. But I was thinking about, okay, what else can I do to make sure that I have the things that I need in life and that make me feel like, okay, I'm having a good time here on this earth, and I'm able to make things happen for myself. And so in the sign of Gemini, education is a big deal. That is the sign of education, of being schooled, right? And so what will you be schooled in? Are you considering that for yourself in any kind of sense of the word? Maybe not. Maybe you were having a different experience than mine, but I was most definitely experiencing things around school. Maybe for you it's transportation. Maybe for you, it's siblings. We all have different ways. But, with the Uranus and Gemini, I want to go to school because I want to elevate my life and I want to elevate my earning potential. And so I really felt that this would be a good move for me if I went to school again. And so far, it's helped. For a lot of us, when a Uranus opposition comes around, when you have Uranus and Sagittarius, we'll be experiencing some health difficulties. Around 42 to 43, we're going to start seeing things slow down. We're going to start seeing the way that we've lived our lives and how that affects us. And I've known about this. I've known about this since studying astrology, so I've been active in making sure that I have the means to take care of myself should anything unexpected happen. And I've changed a lot of my habits in order to prepare for these moments. So just be aware for yourself, millennials, that, the way that we've been doing things most definitely needs to change if they are not in the way of supporting our health, supporting our life, supporting our lungs, that type of thing. You know what I mean? So let's look at the chart. We've been talking for an hour, and this isn't something to take lightly. So this is why I've talked about it at great length. This is an outer planet, like I said. It takes time to move through, and I wanted people to have something to bite down on, something that felt like it was enough. And I wanted to make sure that we covered all bases. So the last part of this is looking at the chart, and when there is a transition of a planet into a new sign, we have the grand opportunity to look at what else is happening in the chart to give us clues about how this change is going to affect us. And so I'll go through some of these planetary highlights, and we can get kind of like a better flavor of what's happening for us. So as Uranus transitions into the sign of Gemini, Venus will be right next to it. A memory of Uranus and Taurus. So we're still thinking about Venusian things. We're thinking about our resources. We're thinking about our food. We're thinking about our money. We're thinking about where we live. And this conjunctions make things a little easier to attain. So maybe at this time, maybe for you personally, this is going to be a really good time to kind of step up your game, for you to earn more, for you to be more. Just because the world is displaying that things are terrible doesn't mean that you personally are going to be experiencing that. You might be elevating in a way that is very unique and special to you, which is a very Uranian thing to say. So in addition to that, I wanted to mention that the opposing force of Aquarius Uranus is Leo, the sign of Leo. And the moon will be at 29 degrees Leo. That's pretty profound because the moon is our personal connection to life. It is taking things personal. It's really thinking about our purpose. And so we're going to really be emotionally thinking about how to improve our lives. And at that 29th degree, it can be very, and you could feel very direct, very purposed, very like, this is something I have to do. So the changes that you are wanting to make for yourself, the creative pursuits that you're looking to leap into, that you feel called to, it might feel like the perfect time for all of you in some kind of way, depending on, where this moon is hitting. And this 29th degree, it will move out in, 2 hours afterwards. So it's not like it's going to stay there. But the energy of us connecting to something personally and feeling so emboldened to make sure that it happens, it's going to happen for the rest of 2026 to 2032. So elevating our lives and making sure that our resources are up and making sure that we got our money and making sure that all of these little things are going right for us is going to be very intense. Okay. And the intensity is expounded upon because we have all of this fire energy in the chart. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 planets in the sign of Aries and 1 asteroid in the sign of Aries. And so there's this level of intensity of recreating the wheel, of realizing that things are disintegrating, and now we have the prime opportunity to rebuild it. We have the prime opportunity to re-identify ourselves, to pick up a new identity, to change things about our lives, to cut off all of our hair, to go here, to go there. I mean, the ideas are endless depending on what you are birthing into this world. And so there's a big energy around really feeling the heat, really feeling like there's a fire underneath you to do something that is going to help and elevate and improve the lives of others. It's a very Uranian thing, but you need a lot of fire and air to make that happen. And boy, is that in this chart. Another planet that's really important to look at, Pluto. Pluto is in Aquarius, and it's making a trine over to Uranus and Venus. So there's a lot of air moving, lots of ideas, lots of people, lots of help, lots of communities, lots of joining forces and getting together. And then we're going to use this fire and fan each other's flame, and it's going to just be a party of really making other people feel special, making other people feel like this is something they can do, this is something we should do together. Let me tell you my idea, you and then you tell me yours, and then we leave this conversation and feel like bigger human beings. We leave this conversation feeling like we are supported by one another, and that we care about each other's individual ideas. Uranus and Gemini. It's going to be a good time. It's also going to be a time of difficulty in some way or another. We're experiencing that now. We're always going to have that, right? The unexpected changes, know that they're going to come. Know in which ways they're going to come. We've talked about it. Sign of Gemini. And know how it's affecting your chart so that you can be fully informed, so that you can be an agent of your own exuberance, of your own life experience. I want things for us to feel like, okay, well, not everything we have in our own control, but there are some things. And we're not going to be held back by all the things we see. We're going to take everything with a grain of salt. And we're going to continue on this path of putting each other first, of putting our ideas first, of building new systems, of realizing that the internet isn't the only way that we're going to stay connected to one another, right? And I think it's going to be a beautiful thing. And I think that's what I'll leave you with. On a positive note, we are elevating, evolving human beings, and we deserve the right to feel good about what is going to happen for us. And that's true, that exists. But what also exists is knowing that there's all this turmoil, all this grief, all of this damnation that's happening to other human beings. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to set ourselves up and our children to have a better experience than our own? Uranus. So knowing that this is happening. We have to stand up. We have to rise up. We have to help one another. We have to lift each other. And we have to center one another in a way that we haven't done in a very long time. You got to come out of COVID. Okay. You gotta communicate with one another again. I know. Oh. Gotta get on the phone and start talking again. Ugh. But I think it could really help us in really important ways. I really am excited to see what people do with community, the ways in which we will rebuild ourselves and rebuild the way that we've been doing things so that civilization can be had again in the most intrinsic ways we know possible, by what's right here, what's right in front of us. And that's really important to remember. All of these things are happening all out there, but how do we improve what's right in front of us? I feel like that's going to be the most profound change for us all, and where we're going to feel most impressed by one another and the way that we do things as people. So I'm wishing all of you the best Uranus and Gemini transits. There will be times where it will feel rough, and then there will be times where it feels really freaking amazing. So ride the wave of amazing. And when we get into these valleys, in between the mountains, in between the high times, we'll be paying attention. We'll be fixing. We'll be mending. And then we'll be right back up again. And that is what we do as human beings, right? So don't get stuck in the valleys by yourself. Reach out. Call somebody. Ask. Listen to something that's positive. Be in the know. And do it in a way in which you have the control, you have the ability to be aware. Yeah? Okay. So I'll see you during the next transit. And if you're in the Bay Area, look me up, astrologyinthewild.com. Me and my partner do new moon events that are really beautiful at the Berkeley Herbal Center. And if you're not able, find your own places that you can be, where we're having conversations like this, where we're welcoming people to be a part of the fold and to be cared about, to be loved on. This is the thing that we're avidly trying to elevate in our lives as people who are creating and making space for community. Come join us. Take care. Peace and love.